Was the initial plan to pull the car around back, and then they had to abort mission, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and then they went out the front door. Part of the plan was to remove Nancy via the front door.
No individual has been officially named as a suspect in this footage. Maureen O'Connell spent her career working in one of the least visible yet most critical areas of criminal investigation. Her work often placed her literally on the ground, kneeling at scene after scene with brushes, cameras, and carefully angled lighting, recovering traces of evidence from surfaces that appeared completely clean to the untrained eye. As a special agent assigned to the FBI's evidence response team, O'Connell was part of an elite forensic unit. She wasn't the one conducting interrogations or developing behavioral profiles. Instead, she was brought in after a scene had been secured, tasked with identifying details others might overlook. So when drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property began circulating, footage that caused viewers to pause, rewind, and scrutinize every frame, O'Connell approached it with the same disciplined methodology her training required. Her focus wasn't on obvious entry points like the gate, front door, windows, or surrounding fixtures. Instead, she immediately zeroed in on the driveway. What stood out to her wasn't just what was visible, but what was missing, and that detail has stayed with her from the outset. On the 67th day of the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, Brian Anon interviewed O'Connell. During that conversation, she explained that her first priority was to look for tire impressions. From the moment the drone footage appeared, she observed only a single set. For those closely following the case, Anon has been one of the few reporters consistently working at ground level, traveling to Tucson, speaking directly with sources, and pursuing leads others have overlooked. This is what made the interview particularly significant. O'Connell's statements have not received the level of attention they arguably warrant. Her background is crucial here. She was not speculating or offering casual opinions online. She spoke on the record, identified by name, as a former FBI evidence response team agent providing a professional forensic perspective on an ongoing missing person case. That distinction matters. The FBI's evidence response team is a specialized unit entrusted with some of the most sensitive and high-pressure crime scene investigations in the country. These are the professionals called in when evidence is fragile, stakes are high, and errors can compromise an entire case. ERT agents are trained across a wide range of forensic disciplines, including blood spatter analysis, latent fingerprint recovery, trace evidence collection, digital forensics, and impression evidence. Tire impression analysis, in particular, is not a minor skill. It plays a central role. Agents are trained to detect, document, preserve, and interpret these impressions under all kinds of conditions, from ideal environments to the most challenging scenarios. That is why O'Connell's observations carry significant weight. Her perspective is grounded in years of direct forensic work, not distant speculation. The layout of Nancy Guthrie's property adds further context, especially the driveway. The home features a circular drive, a curved loop designed to allow vehicles to enter and exit smoothly without reversing. While it may seem like a simple architectural feature, it is a common design element in properties throughout the Southwest and becomes highly relevant when examined through a forensic lens. From a practical standpoint, the circle driveway offers more than convenience, it provides efficiency. A vehicle can enter, complete its purpose, and exit without hesitation. There's no need to reverse, no multi-point turning, and no added time spent exposed in view. Every second saved reduces visibility. If the goal was to remove Nancy Guthrie quickly while limiting how long a vehicle remained noticeable, this type of driveway becomes highly strategic. A driver could pull in, carry out the action, continue forward, and leave seamlessly. O'Connell addressed this directly in her interview. Speaking with Brian Enton, she stated that, based on her professional judgment, the vehicle used to transport Nancy was likely positioned in that front circle driveway. This was not framed as speculation for effect. It was a forensic conclusion grounded in the layout of the property, logical sequencing of events, and the kind of pattern recognition developed through years of analyzing crime scenes. For that reason, her assessment warrants closer attention. She explained that the first detail she examined was the presence of tire impressions on the driveway, and from the moment the drone footage became available, she observed only a single set. This was not a casual theory formed from surface-level viewing. It reflected the mindset of an experienced forensic investigator trained to reconstruct events from minimal physical traces. This leads to a key question: why focus on the front of the property? Much of the discussion has centered on the rear, specifically the back gate and possible activity near the back entrance. So why would a former FBI forensic agent concentrate on the front driveway instead? This is where O'Connell's analysis becomes more precise and introduces an unexpected factor: a nearby dog. She suggested that a dog from a neighboring property may have influenced how events unfolded. A squeaking sound, which is high-pitched, can travel easily across distance. In her view, it's possible the dog reacted to that sound first. While that might seem minor, in a quiet Tucson neighborhood it can carry real significance. Dogs are highly responsive to unfamiliar stimuli. They bark at strangers, unknown vehicles, unusual scents, and sounds that disrupt the normal environment. Sustained barking near the back of a property or along an alley can quickly draw attention. It may prompt someone nearby to look outside, turn on lights, or investigate. In that sense, it can transform a controlled situation into a risky one. O'Connell's interpretation suggests that something, whether the dog or another disturbance, may have forced an adjustment. Rather than exiting from the rear, the vehicle could have been repositioned to the front circle driveway, with Nancy being taken out through the front entrance. That shift changes the significance of the front area entirely. It becomes not just relevant, but central to the sequence of events: the location where the vehicle was placed, where the transfer occurred, and where the departure began. The surface of the driveway adds another layer of importance. Made of decomposed granite rather than concrete or asphalt, it has the ability to retain tire impressions, making it a critical element in any forensic evaluation. O'Connell was deliberate in how she presented her view. She did not describe it as confirmed fact, but as a professional evaluation drawn from the footage, the structure of the scene, and her experience with how abductions are typically executed. Even so, when someone with her level of expertise identifies a specific location and indicates that it was likely used for a vehicle, that assessment carries weight and should not be overlooked. This is where the technical dimension of her analysis becomes especially important. The driveway at Nancy Guthrie's property is not a solid, paved surface. Instead, it is composed of decomposed granite, often referred to as DG, a loose, granular material widely used in desert landscaping throughout Arizona and the broader Southwest. While it is practical for the environment and aesthetically consistent with the region, it presents notable difficulties from a forensic perspective. When a vehicle passes over decomposed granite, it can leave behind tire impressions as the weight presses the material into the tread pattern. However, these impressions are highly delicate. Unlike those formed in mud or wet clay, they are not stable and can be easily disturbed. Foot traffic, additional vehicles, wind, rain, or even natural shifting of the surface can quickly degrade or erase them. In desert environments, where wind is frequent and the ground is constantly shifting, the opportunity to recover such evidence is often very limited. There is also a visual challenge. Decomposed granite has an uneven, textured appearance, which can make tire impressions difficult to detect with the naked eye. The evidence may exist, but without the right approach, it can remain nearly invisible. This is why proper technique is critical. O'Connell pointed out that documenting tire impressions on this type of surface requires more than basic photography. Investigators must use measurement scales, precise positioning, and most importantly, oblique lighting. This involves placing a light source at a very low angle, almost parallel to the ground, so that light sweeps across the surface and casts shadows into the small depressions and raised edges. Those shadows reveal details that standard overhead or natural lighting would completely miss. It operates on the same principle as using a flashlight held close to the floor to reveal footprints on carpet. Details that are invisible under normal light suddenly become clear when the angle changes. In forensic photography, that distinction is critical. Without oblique lighting, capturing usable images of impressions in decomposed granite can be extremely difficult. And identifying the impression is only the first step. Proper documentation also requires placing a calibrated scale on the same plane as the mark, ensuring accurate measurement for later analysis and comparison. This type of evidence collection must be done early and with care, before the scene is disturbed by investigators or others who might unintentionally alter or destroy existing impressions. That is the lens through which O'Connell evaluated the drone footage. She was not focused on dramatic elements. She was looking for signs of proper forensic procedure. Specifically, she was watching to see whether anyone appeared to be processing the driveway as a priority area for tire impression recovery. In the footage available to the public, she did not observe that. There were no visible technicians working at ground level with cameras and measurement tools, no use of oblique lighting, and no clear indication of systematic documentation of the decomposed granite surface in the circle driveway. At the same time, O'Connell was careful not to draw absolute conclusions. She acknowledged that such work could have been carried out outside the time frame captured by the drone, possibly very early in the day or during a period when media coverage was absent. Still, her point remained measured but significant. Based on the footage that is publicly available, she did not see evidence that tire impression recovery had taken place in that area. It is that absence, rather than any single confirmed detail, that has continued to concern her when considering whether impressions in the soil at the front of the property were ever properly documented. "I don't think I ever saw it." That was essentially O'Connell's position. She also noted that when the FBI arrived, people were moved away from the area. A drone had been used at times, but it was not continuously in the air. She was careful to define the limits of what could actually be determined from publicly available footage. It is entirely possible, she acknowledged, that the FBI processed the circle driveway very early, perhaps before dawn, using proper forensic methods and equipment, long before cameras were present. She never argued otherwise. What she stated clearly was narrower and more precise. Based on what can be seen in the released drone footage, she could not verify that such work had taken place. For someone with her background on the evidence response team, that absence is meaningful. It becomes the basis for a deeper, strictly forensic concern, one centered on timing. Timing is critical in evidence recovery. In a case like this, it can determine whether key physical traces are preserved or lost. Nancy Guthrie's property was not maintained as a fully sealed, untouched scene from discovery through every stage of investigation. Public information indicates that the location was accessed multiple times, with investigators, vehicles, and ongoing activity during the early phase of the case. That becomes especially important given the nature of the surface. Decomposed granite is easily disturbed. Every step across it can shift the material. Every vehicle that enters or exits can compress, distort, or erase impressions that may have been left behind. Because of that, O'Connell's central question is straightforward. How quickly was the circle driveway recognized as a potentially critical area, and how fast was it secured for impression recovery? If investigators identified its importance immediately and protected it right away, then valuable evidence may still have been preserved. But if that recognition came later, the opportunity to recover a meaningful tire impression could have disappeared before anyone realized its significance. This is the core of her concern. It is not speculation for effect. It is grounded in how physical evidence behaves under real conditions. In forensic work, opportunities are often brief. Surfaces degrade, environments shift, and once evidence is altered or lost, even the most experienced investigators are limited to what remains. If a clear tire impression had been successfully recovered, its value could have been substantial. The FBI maintains extensive databases of tire tread patterns, allowing examiners to compare impressions to known designs from manufacturers. A well-preserved impression can narrow analysis down to a specific tire model, which can then indicate a particular class of vehicle. For example, a tread pattern associated with a truck suggests one direction, while a pattern linked to a smaller passenger vehicle suggests another. In the best cases, unique wear patterns or damage can go even further, potentially pointing toward a specific tire rather than just a category. The investigative chain is simple but powerful. A tire impression can identify a tire type. That tire type can indicate a vehicle class. From there, combined with surveillance footage, witness statements, records, and other investigative tools, authorities may be able to identify a specific vehicle, and ultimately, the individuals connected to it. But that entire process depends on one starting point, the impression itself. O'Connell's interpretation also aligns with a broader pattern already discussed in coverage of the case. Much attention has focused on the rear of the property, particularly the idea that elements near the back entrance may have been staged to suggest a certain sequence of events. Seen in that context, the circle driveway theory does not contradict earlier perspectives, it adds to them. If the rear area was arranged to imply that Nancy exited from the back, then the actual removal may have occurred elsewhere, with the front circle driveway serving as the true point of loading and departure. Alternatively, if the original plan did involve the rear and something disrupted it, such as the neighbor's dog or another unexpected factor, then the front driveway may have become a fallback option. In either scenario, the front of the property remains a critical location. Whether it was the intended plan from the beginning or an improvised adjustment, it stands out as a likely operational in the sequence of events. At the same time, there is still a significant amount of information that has not been made public. There are still many unknowns surrounding this aspect of the case. It is unclear whether tire impressions were ever recovered from the circle driveway, whether investigators made an attempt to collect them, or exactly when such work might have taken place. There is no public confirmation of whether any impressions, if preserved, matched known tread patterns. It is also uncertain how much the surface may have been disturbed before any forensic processing began. Most importantly, what investigators know internally remains out of public view. What is on record, however, carries weight. Maureen O'Connell, a former FBI evidence response team agent speaking under her own name, reviewed the available drone footage and stated that she did not observe visible signs of tire impression recovery work being conducted in the circle driveway. She emphasized the challenges posed by decomposed granite and identified the front circular drive as the most likely location where a transport vehicle may have been positioned. She also raised a clear concern: if that area was not processed quickly, a potentially critical piece of vehicle evidence may no longer be recoverable. This is not speculation drawn from anonymous sources or online discussion. It is a documented professional opinion from a trained forensic specialist speaking directly to a journalist about an active case. That alone gives her assessment a level of credibility that stands out in the broader conversation. At the same time, the limited public communication from the FBI has intensified interest in questions like these. Law enforcement silence during an active investigation is standard practice, often necessary to protect leads, avoid alerting potential suspects, and preserve the integrity of future legal proceedings. However, in the case of Nancy Guthrie, the lack of detailed updates has been particularly noticeable. Reporters, former investigators, and analysts familiar with high-profile missing person cases have all pointed out how little has been officially confirmed. Brian Enton's reporting has repeatedly underscored how difficult it has been to obtain substantive information. That absence of detail is part of why O'Connell's analysis has drawn attention. She is working with what is visible, in a situation where official disclosures remain limited. The public knows the FBI has been involved and that the property was processed, but what that process uncovered has largely not been shared. One piece of evidence that has received significant focus is a black glove found in a field near the roadside, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. Investigators noted that the glove visually resembled the type worn by the individual seen in doorbell camera footage. While this was not confirmed as a definitive forensic match, the similarity, combined with the presence of DNA, made it one of the most important physical items recovered away from the residence. Based on publicly discussed timelines, the glove was collected by the Pima County Sheriff's Department and sent to a private forensic laboratory in Florida. Initial testing reportedly identified DNA from an unknown male, someone not identified as Nancy Guthrie and not known to have a close connection to her. After verification, the DNA profile was entered into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, allowing comparison against profiles already stored in the database. This step is significant, but it has limitations. CODIS can generate quick matches only if the individual's DNA is already on file, typically from prior qualifying offenses or submissions. If no match is found, investigators must turn to other methods. One such method is genetic genealogy, which has transformed the resolution of major cold cases in recent years. By comparing DNA to profiles voluntarily uploaded to public genealogy databases, investigators can identify distant relatives and work toward a suspect through family connections. This approach has proven highly effective, solving cases that remained open for decades. In this investigation, both paths appear to be in play. CODIS provides one route, while genetic genealogy offers another. Over time, either could produce the identification investigators need. Still, DNA is only one component of a much broader effort. Another key resource is the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, CAST. In cases like this, CAST typically analyzes large volumes of cell tower data from the time frame surrounding a disappearance. Every active phone within range of nearby towers during that period leaves behind connection data. Investigators can use this information to determine which devices were present, how long they remained, and where they moved afterward. If the individual responsible carried a phone, CAST may already have mapped a movement pattern tied to that night. According to insights from former FBI personnel, investigators in cases like this often develop lists of individuals identified through such analysis, some quickly ruled out, others remaining under scrutiny. This reflects how major investigations operate behind the scenes. While the public sees limited updates, press releases, occasional confirmations, or legal filings, investigators are simultaneously building timelines, filtering data, and connecting pieces of evidence using advanced tools and methods. All of this contributes to the increasing pressure surrounding the case. Public appeals, family involvement, media coverage, forensic analysis, digital tracking, and biological evidence are all converging. As these elements continue to develop, the margin for unanswered questions narrows. If anyone has information, whether it is a friend, a relative, a neighbor, or someone who noticed a change in behavior after February 1st, the environment around this case is becoming more focused and more intense. At the core of this case is a reality that feels both simple and deeply unsettling. Across the country, there are elderly individuals living alone in quiet neighborhoods. Homes with curved driveways, desert-style landscaping, and nearby houses where a barking dog is often the first sign that something is out of place. These environments are built on a sense of routine and safety, something families and communities rely on every day. What happened to Nancy Guthrie disrupted that sense of normalcy. And in this situation, one of the most critical questions may come down to a brief, easily overlooked moment, a section of driveway covered in decomposed granite, a possible tire impression, and a short window of time in which that evidence could either be preserved or lost before its importance was fully recognized. This reflects a broader truth in forensic work: evidence does not wait. Scenes evolve quickly, and what remains is often determined in the earliest hours. From the beginning of this case through day 67 and beyond, public attention has remained unusually focused. Drone footage, interviews, and every on-record statement from qualified voices have been closely examined. Investigations are not always driven forward by a single dramatic discovery. In many cases, progress comes from sustained attention to technical details that might otherwise be overlooked. That is why perspectives like Maureen O'Connell's carry significance. It is also why continued reporting from journalists such as Brian Enton remains important. The unresolved questions surrounding the circle driveway, the decomposed granite surface, and the apparent absence, or lack of visible confirmation, of tire impression recovery continue to stand out as key points of interest. This material is presented for informational and educational purposes. All observations and theories are based on publicly available reporting, documented journalism, and statements made on the record by identified sources. No individual is named or suggested here as a suspect. Any analytical points are presented as interpretation, not confirmed fact. Anyone with information related to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is encouraged to contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. Recent coverage has continued to revisit central questions in the case. One of those questions focuses on whether the original plan may have involved accessing the property from the rear, only to be abandoned, leading to a shift toward the front circle driveway and an exit through the front door. Another possibility is that the front entry was part of the plan from the beginning. Within this discussion, Maureen O'Connell's background remains central. She built her career in one of the least visible areas of criminal investigation, working directly at ground level. At countless scenes, she examined surfaces up close using brushes, cameras, and carefully controlled lighting to uncover details others could not see. As a former special agent on the FBI's evidence response team, one of the most highly trained forensic units in the country, her role was not to conduct interviews or develop investigative theories. She was brought in after scenes were secured, tasked with identifying and preserving physical evidence that might otherwise go unnoticed. When drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property began circulating, footage that led many viewers to analyze and replay specific moments, O'Connell approached it through that same forensic lens. Rather than focusing on obvious entry points like gates, doors, or windows, her attention immediately shifted to the driveway. What she observed there, or more precisely, what she did not observe, has remained a key point in her analysis since the beginning. On day 67 of the investigation, she discussed these observations in an interview with Brian Enton, offering a perspective shaped by years of hands-on forensic experience. She began with a straightforward step, looking for tire impressions on the driveway. From the first moment the drone footage was available, she observed only a single set. For those closely tracking the case, Brian Enton has stood out as one of the few reporters consistently working at ground level, traveling to Tucson, speaking directly with sources, and pursuing leads others have not followed. That context made the interview particularly notable. O'Connell's remarks have not received the level of attention they arguably merit. Her background is essential here. She was not offering casual speculation or reacting like a typical online observer. She spoke on the record, identified by name, as a former FBI evidence response team agent providing a professional forensic interpretation of an active missing person case. That distinction carries significant weight. The FBI's evidence response team is a specialized unit responsible for some of the most sensitive and high-pressure crime scene work in the country. These are the investigators called in when evidence is fragile, stakes are high, and mistakes can compromise an entire case. Their training spans multiple forensic disciplines, including blood spatter analysis, latent fingerprint recovery, trace evidence collection, digital forensics, and impression evidence. Within that framework, tire impression analysis is not a minor detail, it is a core skill. Agents are trained to locate, document, preserve, cast, and interpret tire impressions across a wide range of environments, from controlled scenes to the most challenging conditions. That is why O'Connell's observations carry real credibility. They come from years of direct, hands-on forensic work. The physical layout of Nancy Guthrie's property is also central to her assessment, particularly the front driveway. The home features a circular driveway, a curved loop that allows vehicles to enter, move through, and exit without reversing. On the surface, it appears to be a simple, practical design, common in properties across the Southwest. But from an operational standpoint, it offers a key advantage: efficiency. A vehicle can enter, complete its purpose, and leave without hesitation. There is no need to back into the street, no multi-point turn, and no additional time spent exposed. Every second is streamlined. If someone intended to remove Nancy Guthrie quickly while minimizing visibility, this type of driveway would be an ideal location. A driver could pull in, carry out the action, continue forward, and leave without delay. O'Connell stated this directly in her interview. She told Brian Enton that, in her professional opinion, the vehicle used to transport Nancy was likely positioned in that front circle driveway. This was not framed as dramatic speculation. It was a forensic conclusion based on the layout of the property, logical sequencing of events, and the kind of pattern recognition developed through years of reconstructing incidents from physical evidence. For that reason alone, her conclusion deserves closer attention. Her observation about the single set of tire impressions was not an offhand comment. It reflected a methodical approach shaped by experience. It was the perspective of someone accustomed to working backward from the smallest details to understand behavior at a scene. This leads to a key question: why focus on the front? Much of the discussion has centered on the rear of the property, the back gate, and possible activity near the back entrance. So why would a trained former FBI forensic specialist prioritize the front driveway? This is where O'Connell's analysis becomes more specific and introduces an unexpected element: a nearby dog. She suggested that a dog from an adjacent property may have influenced how events unfolded. A squeaking sound, which is high-pitched, can travel over distance. In her view, it is possible that the dog reacted to that sound first. While that may seem like a minor detail, in a quiet Tucson neighborhood it can be significant. Dogs are highly responsive to unfamiliar stimuli. They bark at strangers, unknown vehicles, unusual scents, and sounds that disrupt the normal pattern of their surroundings. A dog repeatedly barking at a vehicle near the rear of a property or in an alley can quickly draw attention. It is the kind of disruption that prompts someone to look outside, turn on lights, or step out to investigate. In that sense, It can turn what might have been a controlled plan into something far more exposed and unpredictable. Based on O'Connell's interpretation, an interruption like this, whether caused by the dog or something else, may have forced a shift in how events unfolded. Instead of leaving through the rear, the vehicle may have been moved to the front circle driveway, with Nancy potentially taken out through the front entrance. That change would make the front driveway not just relevant, but central to the sequence. It becomes the point where the vehicle was positioned, where the transfer occurred, and where the departure began. Its importance is further increased by the nature of the surface. Unlike concrete or asphalt, the decomposed granite in that area is capable of retaining tire impressions. O'Connell was careful to frame this as a professional assessment, not a confirmed fact. Her conclusions were based on the available footage, the physical layout of the property, and her experience analyzing how abductions can be carried out. Still, when someone with her expertise highlights a specific location and identifies it as likely significant, that perspective warrants attention. The technical aspect of her analysis is critical. The driveway is not a solid paved surface but is composed of decomposed granite, often referred to as DG, a loose, granular material commonly used in desert landscaping across Arizona and the Southwest. While it is practical and visually consistent with the environment, it presents challenges from a forensic standpoint. Vehicles passing over decomposed granite can leave tire impressions as the weight presses the material into the tread pattern. However, these impressions are fragile. Unlike marks in mud or wet clay, they are not stable and can easily be altered or erased. Footsteps, additional vehicles, wind, rain, or natural shifting of the surface can all degrade the evidence. In desert conditions, where wind is frequent, the opportunity to preserve such impressions can disappear quickly. There is also a visual difficulty. The uneven, textured nature of decomposed granite makes impressions hard to detect with the naked eye. Even when they are present, they may not be immediately visible without proper technique. O'Connell emphasized that documenting impressions on this type of surface requires more than basic photography. Investigators must use measurement scales, precise positioning, and most importantly, oblique lighting. This involves placing a light source at a very low angle, nearly parallel to the ground, so that light moves across the surface and creates shadows within the small depressions and raised areas. These shadows reveal details that standard lighting conditions would miss entirely. It follows the same principle as using a flashlight close to the floor to reveal footprints on carpet. Details that are invisible under normal lighting become clear when illuminated from a low angle. In forensic imaging, this difference is critical. Without oblique lighting, impressions in decomposed granite can be extremely difficult to capture in a way that allows for proper measurement, comparison, or use as evidence. And identifying the impression is only the first step. Accurate documentation also requires placing a calibrated scale on the same plane as the impression so its dimensions can be recorded precisely. This process must be done early and carefully, before the area is disturbed by investigators or others who might unintentionally alter existing marks. This is the framework O'Connell applied when reviewing the drone footage. She was not focused on dramatic elements but on whether proper forensic procedures appeared to be taking place. Specifically, she was looking for signs that the driveway was being processed as a priority area for tire impression recovery. In the publicly available footage, she did not observe that. There were no visible technicians working at ground level with cameras and measurement tools, no use of oblique lighting, and no clear indication of systematic documentation of the decomposed granite surface in the circle driveway. At the same time, she made it clear that this does not mean the work was never done. She acknowledged that investigators may have processed the area outside the time frame captured by the drone, possibly very early in the day or during periods when media coverage was absent. Her conclusion remained measured but significant. Based on what could be seen in the available footage, she could not identify evidence that tire impression recovery had taken place in that location. It is that absence, rather than any confirmed detail, that has continued to concern her when considering whether impressions in the front driveway were ever properly captured. The content centers on a key forensic concern raised by former FBI Evidence Response Team agent Maureen O'Connell regarding the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. After reviewing drone footage, she noted the absence of visible tire impression recovery work in the front circle driveway, an area she believes is the most likely location where a vehicle was staged. While she acknowledged that investigators may have processed the scene, the recorded time frame, she could not confirm it based on available footage. Her concern focuses on timing. Because the driveway is made of decomposed granite, a fragile surface easily disturbed by movement and environmental factors, any delay in securing it could result in the loss of critical tire evidence. O'Connell emphasized that tire impressions can play a crucial role in identifying vehicle type and potentially narrowing down suspects, but only if they are preserved early. She also suggested that a disruption, possibly a neighbor's dog, may have forced a shift in events, moving activity from the rear of the property to the front driveway. Despite many unknowns, including whether impressions were ever collected, her analysis stands out as a professional, on-record forensic assessment rather than speculation. The case is further complicated by limited public information from authorities, which is standard in active investigations but has left many questions unanswered. Other evidence, such as a glove containing unknown male DNA and ongoing analysis using databases like CODIS, Genetic Genealogy, and FBI Cellular Tracking, CAST, shows that multiple investigative paths are being pursued. Overall, the case highlights how critical early evidence handling is, and how small, time-sensitive details, like a possible tire impression, can significantly impact the direction of an investigation.